Peak: Secrets from the New Science of Expertise, by Anders Ericsson and Robert Poole. Introduction. Have you ever watched someone do something so well it almost seemed magical? A musician whose fingers fly across the keys, playing a piece so complex it feels like they were born with the music inside them. An athlete, like the basketball player Ray Allen, whose jump shot is so perfect, so graceful, that people say it must be a gift from God. Or maybe you've heard the stories of the great Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. A little boy, barely tall enough to see over the harpsichord, captivating audiences across Europe at just 7 years old. But it wasn't just his playing that stunned people. It was something else, something that seemed to defy explanation. The story goes that young Mozart could hear any note, from a violin, a clock chime, even a sneeze, and instantly name it. C sharp, E flat. He had what we now call perfect pitch, an ability so rare, only about 1 in every 10,000 people has it. For centuries, this was held up as the ultimate proof of innate, God-given talent. A gift bestowed upon a lucky few. But what if I told you that wasn't the real gift? What if the story we've told ourselves about talent, about genius, about what it takes to be truly great, is wrong? For over 30 years, a brilliant psychological scientist named Anders Ericsson dedicated his life to studying these exceptional people, the experts, the prodigies, the ones who stand at the very peak of human achievement. And what he discovered is a truth so profound it has the power to change not only how you see the world, but how you see yourself. He discovered that the real gift wasn't perfect pitch, or a beautiful jump shot, or a genius for chess. The real gift is something far more powerful, and it's something every single one of us is born with. Today, we're going to uncover the secrets from his life's work, compiled in the book Peak. This isn't just a summary, it's a journey into the science of expertise. By the end of our time together, you will understand the one fundamental principle that separates the good from the great, and you will have a roadmap, a clear, practical guide, to unlock your own extraordinary potential, in any area you choose. Book Summary. Our story begins not in a concert hall in 18th century Europe, but in a small laboratory at Carnegie Mellon University in the late 1970s. A young Anders Ericsson, just starting his career, designed a simple, almost boring experiment. He hired a typical undergraduate student named Steve Falloon to come in a few times a week and memorize numbers. That's it. Ericsson would read a string of random digits, 1 per second. 7, 4, 0, 1, and Steve would try to repeat them back. On his first day, Steve was perfectly average. Like most people, he could reliably remember about 7 digits. The length of a local phone number. But push him to 9 or 10 digits, and he'd hit a wall. In fact, after just 4 sessions, Steve was ready to give up. He told Ericsson, "There appears to be a limit for me somewhere around 8 or 9 digits. It really doesn't matter what I use, it seems very difficult to get." And at the time, all of psychological science agreed with him. It was a well-known fact that the human brain has a strict limit on what's called short-term memory. We can only hold about 7 pieces of information at once. Steve, it seemed, had reached his natural, built-in limit. But Ericsson, driven by a flicker of curiosity from an old, forgotten study, encouraged him to keep trying. And then, on the 5th day, something happened. Steve managed to remember a 10-digit number. Then another. Then, for the first time ever, an 11-digit string. It was just 2 more digits than his previous best, but it was a crack in the wall. He had found a way to push through what everyone, including himself, believed was a fixed ceiling. That day was the beginning of one of the most surprising journeys in the history of psychology. Steve didn't stop at 11 digits. He kept practicing, hour after hour, week after week. Slowly, painstakingly, he improved. After 60 sessions, he could remember 20 digits. After 100, he was up to 40, more than any professional memory artist had ever achieved. He kept going. For over 2 years, Steve Falloon sat in that lab, listening to numbers. And by the end, this perfectly average college student could hear a random string of 82 digits and repeat them back flawlessly. Think about that for a moment. 82 numbers. That's like memorizing 10 different phone numbers, in order, after hearing them just once. It was a feat so incredible it seemed impossible. But Steve had done it. So, what happened? Did Steve Falloon suddenly develop a superhuman brain? No. He did something much more profound. He taught us the first great secret of peak performance. He stumbled upon what Ericsson would later call purposeful practice. Most of us, when we try to learn something new, whether it's playing tennis, learning to drive, or even baking a pie, follow a predictable pattern. We get some instruction, we practice until we reach a level that feels good enough, and then we stop improving. We automate the skill. The tennis player plays for 20 years but never gets better than they were after the first two. The doctor who has been practicing for 30 years may actually be worse than the doctor who is just 5 years out of medical school, because their skills have slowly degraded without any effort to improve them. This is what Ericsson calls naive practice, just doing something over and over and hoping you'll get better. Steve Falloon did something different. His practice was purposeful. And purposeful practice has a few key characteristics that set it apart. First, it has well-defined, specific goals. Steve's goal each day was simple: remember one more digit than last time. It wasn't just a vague wish to get better. It was a clear, measurable target. If you want to improve your golf game, your goal can't just be lower my handicap. It has to be broken down into tiny, specific steps. Today, I will focus on keeping my head down through my swing for 10 shots in a row. You're not just hitting balls, you're working on something specific. Second, purposeful practice is focused. You have to give it your full attention. When Steve was trying to break through a new barrier, he was completely absorbed. He'd give himself pep talks, he'd pound the table in concentration. He wasn't daydreaming or thinking about his plans for the weekend. If your mind is wandering, you're not improving. Third, purposeful practice involves feedback. You need to know whether you're doing it right or wrong. For Steve, the feedback was instant. He either got the number string right, or he didn't. But more importantly, he gave himself feedback. He paid attention to why he made a mistake. He knew which digits had tripped him up, and he would adjust his strategy for the next attempt. Without feedback, you're flying blind. You can't fix a mistake if you don't know you're making it. And finally, and this is perhaps the most important part of all, purposeful practice requires getting out of your comfort zone. This is the fundamental law of improvement. If you never push yourself beyond what you can already do, you will never get better. The amateur pianist who has played the same dozen songs for 30 years has thousands of hours of practice, but he's no better than he was 3 decades ago. He's just been reinforcing what is already comfortable. Steve was constantly being pushed. The experiment was designed so that every time he succeeded, the next task was a little bit harder. He was always living right at the edge of his abilities. And that, Ericsson discovered, is where growth happens. But sometimes, just trying harder isn't enough. When Steve would hit a plateau, a point where he just couldn't seem to improve, he didn't just push harder. He pushed differently. He realized his old methods weren't working anymore, so he had to invent new ones. He was a long-distance runner, so he started grouping the numbers into running times. 3, 4, 9, 2 became 3 minutes, 49.2 seconds, a near world-class mile time. It was no longer a random string of numbers. It was something meaningful that he could store in his long-term memory. He was creating what Ericsson would later identify as the key to all expert performance, a mental representation. Steve had shown that with the right kind of practice, a normal person could achieve superhuman results. But his story also revealed a limit. When Ericsson and his colleague Bill Chase tried to replicate the experiment with another student, Renee, she improved, but she hit a wall at around 20 digits and could never get past it. She was practicing just as hard as Steve, but she was using a different, less effective method for memorizing. Trying hard wasn't enough. There was another layer to the secret. This is where the story shifts from the laboratory to the real world, to fields where performance has been honed over centuries. And it takes us to a question that seems, at first, to have nothing to do with memory. Why does your brain care about London taxi drivers? Few cities in the world are as confusing to navigate as London. It's a chaotic maze of twisting streets, one-ways, and dead ends. A GPS can barely handle it. But London cabbies? They are legendary. There are 25,000 of them, and they can get you from any point A to any point B with astonishing efficiency, all from memory. To become a licensed London cabbie, you have to pass a series of exams known simply as the knowledge. It's been called the most difficult test in the world. You have to memorize roughly 25,000 streets within a 6-mile radius of the city center, along with every park, hospital, theater, museum, and point of interest. It takes years of driving around the city on a motorbike, studying routes, and internalizing a mental map of London that is almost incomprehensibly complex. In the early 2000s, a neuroscientist named Eleanor Maguire decided to see what this intense training did to their brains. Using MRI scanners, she compared the brains of London cabbies to the brains of other people, including London bus drivers who drove the same routes every day but never had to navigate. What she found was startling. A specific part of the brain called the posterior hippocampus, an area crucial for spatial memory and navigation, was significantly larger in the taxi drivers. Not only that, but the longer a person had been a cabbie, the larger that part of their brain was. But this raised a chicken and egg question. Did they become cabbies because they were born with bigger hippocampi, or did the training make that part of their brain grow? To answer this, Maguire did something brilliant. She followed a group of aspiring cabbies for 4 years, scanning their brains at the beginning and at the end of their training. At the start, there was no difference between their brains and a control group. But 4 years later, the trainees who had successfully passed the knowledge and become licensed cabbies, their posterior hippocampi had physically grown. The brains of those who had failed or dropped out showed no change. This was one of the most dramatic demonstrations ever that the human brain isn't fixed. It's adaptable. It's plastic. Just like lifting weights builds your muscles, intense mental training can physically change the structure of your brain. This incredible adaptability is the deep magic behind human potential. For decades, scientists believed our brains were hardwired from birth. You were either wired for music, or you weren't. You had the math brain, or you didn't. But we now know that's not true. The brain responds to challenge by rewiring itself. It makes new connections, strengthens old ones, and in some areas, even grows new neurons. This is the why behind Steve Falloon's amazing memory. It's the why behind the London cabbie's navigational genius. And it's the why behind the story of Mozart's perfect pitch. Remember how we started? With the assumption that perfect pitch was a rare, innate gift. Well, in 2014, a Japanese psychologist named Ayako Sakakibara decided to test that idea. She took 24 ordinary children between the ages of 2 and 6 and put them through a special training program designed to teach them to identify musical chords. After several months of short daily sessions, every single one of the children had developed perfect pitch? 100%. Not 1 in 10,000. All of them. The conclusion is inescapable. Perfect pitch isn't the gift. The ability to develop perfect pitch is the gift. And it's a gift we are all born with. The real gift is the incredible adaptability of the human brain. Mozart wasn't born with a magical musical gene. He was born with a brain that, like every other child's, was incredibly plastic. And he had a father, Leopold, who was obsessed with turning his children into musical prodigies. Leopold started training young Wolfgang before the age of 4, working with him full-time on keyboard, violin, and composition. The intense, early training rewired his young brain, creating the circuitry for perfect pitch and his other astounding musical abilities. So, the power to change, to adapt, to grow new abilities, that is our shared birthright. The question then becomes, what is the best way to harness this power? Purposeful practice, as we saw with Steve Falloon, is a huge step. But it's not the whole story. Renee, the other student, practiced purposefully but didn't achieve the same results. The London cabbies didn't just drive around aimlessly, they followed a structured, centuries-old system for mastering the knowledge. Sakakibara's children didn't just play with pianos, they followed a very specific training regimen. In the most highly developed fields, classical music, ballet, chess, elite sports, the methods of training have been refined over generations. They are not just purposeful, they are informed. They are built on a deep understanding of what the best performers do and how they got there. This is what Anders Ericsson calls deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is the gold standard. It is the most powerful method for improvement ever discovered, and it is what separates the very best in the world from everyone else. And it has a few characteristics that make it different from even purposeful practice. First, deliberate practice happens in a field that is already well developed, where the best performers are clearly identifiable and the skills required for excellence are well understood. Think of a violin virtuoso or an Olympic gymnast. There are established techniques and training methods that have been passed down and improved upon for decades, even centuries. Second, and this is crucial, deliberate practice requires a teacher or coach. Someone who already understands what expert performance looks like and can provide you with practice activities designed to get you there. A good coach can see things you can't see, provide immediate, targeted feedback, and push you in ways you wouldn't push yourself. They give you a roadmap that has been tested by generations of performers before you. Deliberate practice, like purposeful practice, is about always working just beyond your comfort zone, with intense focus and clear goals. But it's practice that knows where it is going and how to get there. They interviewed them all, asking about every aspect of their musical lives. When did they start? Who were their teachers? How did they practice? Across the board, all the students agreed on one thing. The single most important activity for improvement was solitary practice. Not playing for fun, not performing, but being alone in a room, working on the specific exercises and challenges their teachers had given them. And they all agreed on something else: it wasn't fun. It was hard, draining work. But when the researchers calculated the total number of hours each student had devoted to this kind of focused, solitary practice over their lifetime, they found a stunning pattern. By age 18, the good students, the future music teachers, had accumulated, on average, around 3,400 hours of practice. The better students had practiced for an average of 5,300 hours. And the best students, the elite soloists, they had put in an average of 7,400 hours. There were no exceptions. They found no naturals who had floated to the top with little effort, and no grinders who had practiced obsessively but failed to improve. The amount of time spent in deliberate practice was the single most important factor separating the good, the better, and the best. When they extended the study to professional musicians in two of Berlin's world-class orchestras, they found the same thing. The amount of practice those professionals had put in by age 18 was almost identical to that of the best students at the academy. This is the research that led to the famous 10,000-hour rule, popularized by Malcolm Gladwell. And while Ericsson acknowledges that the rule captures an important truth, that it takes a tremendous amount of time to become an expert, he also clarifies a few crucial points. First, 10,000 is just an average, a nice round number. Some fields take more, some take less. Steve Falloon became the best in the world at his specific skill in a few hundred hours. An international concert pianist might need 25,000 hours. Second, and most importantly, it's not just any 10,000 hours. It's 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. Just performing, like the Beatles did in Hamburg, isn't the same as the focused, goal-driven practice the violinists did. So, the true lesson isn't about a magic number. It's about the immense power of sustained, high-quality practice. It shows that in any field where people work to become experts, there is a direct and powerful relationship between the amount of deliberate practice and the level of performance. But what exactly is happening in the brain during all those hours of practice? What are we building? This brings us to the single most important concept in the entire book: mental representations. To understand this, let's turn to the seemingly magical world of blindfold chess. A grandmaster like Alexander Alekhine could play dozens of games simultaneously, without seeing any of the boards, keeping the position of every single piece in his head. How is this possible? It's not a photographic memory. In fact, if you show a chess grandmaster a board with pieces arranged randomly, in a way that would never happen in a real game, their memory is no better than a beginner's. They can only remember about 3 or 4 pieces. Their incredible memory only works for patterns that make sense in a game of chess. What does this tell us? It tells us they aren't seeing individual pieces. They are seeing patterns. They are seeing relationships, lines of force, structures of attack and defense. Through thousands of hours of studying games played by other masters, they have built a vast library of these patterns in their long-term memory. Ericsson's mentor, Herb Simon, estimated that a grandmaster has about 50,000 of these chunks stored away. When a master looks at a board, they don't see 32 pieces. They see a handful of familiar patterns interacting with each other. This is a mental representation. It's a highly complex and sophisticated mental structure that allows them to process a huge amount of information quickly, sidestepping the normal limits of short-term memory. We all use mental representations every day. When I say the word dog, you don't have to consciously recall a list of facts: furry, 4 legs, barks, wags tail. All of that information is instantly accessible in a single, integrated concept: your mental representation of a dog. When you read this sentence, you're not sounding out each letter. You are instantly recognizing patterns of letters as words, and patterns of words as ideas. What sets expert performers apart is the quality and quantity of their mental representations, which are specific to their field. A professional baseball hitter doesn't have faster reflexes than a normal person. But they have a highly developed mental representation of a pitcher's delivery. The moment the ball leaves the pitcher's hand, they can recognize the subtle pattern of the arm motion, the spin of the ball, and predict with incredible accuracy whether it will be a fastball, a curveball, or a slider, and where it will cross the plate. A novice sees a blur. The expert sees a clear, predictable pattern. A top surgeon, before ever making an incision, creates a detailed mental representation of the entire operation, visualizing the patient's unique anatomy and planning for potential trouble spots. If something unexpected happens during the surgery, It's the deviation from this mental map that alerts them that something is wrong. Deliberate practice is, at its core, the process of developing ever more effective mental representations. When you practice a piece on the violin, you're not just training your fingers. You're refining your mental representation of how the piece should sound, the pitch, the timing, the emotion. This internal blueprint guides your fingers, and it allows you to hear when you've made a mistake and correct it. The better your mental representation, the better you can practice, and the better you practice, the better your mental representation becomes. It's a virtuous circle. This is the true path to extraordinary. It's not about being born with a gift. It's about taking the gift we all have, the adaptability of our brain, and shaping it, step by step, through thousands of hours of focused, guided, deliberate practice, building the powerful mental representations that are the essence of expertise. So, how can we apply this in our own lives? For many of us, becoming an international concert violinist isn't the goal. We want to get better at our jobs, our hobbies, our passions. But many professions don't have the centuries-old training traditions of music or ballet. This is where we must become our own coaches, applying the principles of deliberate practice as best we can. Ericsson points to the U.S. Navy's Top Gun school as a fantastic example. In the 1960s, Navy fighter pilots were performing poorly in dogfights over Vietnam. Their solution was to create a school where pilots could engage in realistic combat simulations against their own best pilots, who played the role of the enemy. The key wasn't just the flying, it was the after-action reports. After every simulated dogfight, the pilots would gather for a relentless debrief. What did you see? Why did you make that turn? What was your mistake? What could you have done differently? They were getting constant, immediate feedback. They were pushed out of their comfort zones in a safe environment where they could make mistakes, learn from them, and then try again the next day. The results were dramatic. The Navy's kill ratio skyrocketed from 2 to 1 to over 12 to 1. This is the model. Whatever you want to improve, you need to find ways to create your own Top Gun style training. You have to find a way to practice with focus, get feedback, and make adjustments. If you want to be a better public speaker, don't just give speeches. Record yourself. Watch the playback and identify one specific thing to improve. Maybe you say I'm too much, or you don't make enough eye contact. For your next talk, focus solely on improving that one thing. Then, get feedback from a trusted colleague. This is how you turn performance into practice. This approach requires a fundamental shift in mindset. You must reject 3 common myths. The first myth is that our abilities are limited by our genetics. This book shows us that we can shape our own potential. The second myth is that if you do something for long enough, you're bound to get better. As we've seen, this is false. Repetition without a goal and without feedback leads to stagnation. The third myth is that all it takes to improve is effort. Just trying harder isn't enough. You have to try differently, with a specific plan designed to improve a specific skill. Even if you don't have a formal teacher, you can still apply these principles. Benjamin Franklin famously taught himself to become a brilliant writer. He would read an essay he admired from a magazine, jot down hints for each sentence, and then, a few days later, try to rewrite the essay from his hints. He would then compare his version to the original, identifying his weaknesses in vocabulary, structure, and logic. He was breaking down the skill, focusing on specific components, getting feedback by comparing his work to a master's, and fixing his mistakes. He was engaging in deliberate practice, all by himself. Of course, the journey is not always easy. One of the biggest challenges we all face is hitting a plateau. That moment when you feel stuck, when all your practice doesn't seem to be leading to any improvement. This is where most people give up. But Ericsson offers a way through. When you're on a plateau, it's usually because some specific component of your skill is holding you back. The solution is not to just practice the whole thing harder, but to identify that specific weakness and attack it. A typist who wants to get faster shouldn't just try to type everything faster. They should intentionally push their speed by 10 to 20%, forcing themselves to make mistakes. This will reveal which letter combinations are slowing them down. Then, they can design specific exercises to practice just those combinations. You don't get better by doing what you can already do. You get better by pushing yourself to do what you can't quite do yet, identifying exactly what's breaking down, and focusing all your energy on fixing it. The other great challenge, of course, is motivation. Deliberate practice is hard. It's mentally and physically draining. So how do the experts keep going for years, even decades? It's not about some magical willpower they're born with. It's about building habits and systems that support their practice. They set aside a specific time each day, free from distractions. They understand the importance of rest and sleep to recover from intense mental effort. But more than that, they find reasons to keep going. Initially, motivation might be external, praise from parents, the desire to win a competition. But over time, it becomes internal. They begin to identify as a musician, a scientist, a golfer. The skill itself becomes part of who they are, and practice becomes an investment in that identity. They also build a social support system. They surround themselves with other people who share their passion, who understand the struggle, and who can offer encouragement. Deliberate practice can be a lonely pursuit, but it doesn't have to be a journey you take alone. In the end, what Anders Ericsson's work gives us is more than just a method for learning. It's a new philosophy of human potential. For centuries, we have defined ourselves as Homo sapiens, knowing man. We have prided ourselves on our ability to accumulate knowledge. But perhaps a better name for our species would be Homo exercens, practicing man, the species that, unlike any other, can consciously take control of its own development. The species that can look at its own limitations and, through focused effort, remake itself into something more. The world is changing faster than ever before. The skills we have today may not be the ones we need tomorrow. In such a world, the ability to learn, to adapt, to continuously improve, is not just a path to excellence. It is the key to survival and fulfillment. The message of Peak is a message of profound hope and empowerment. It tells us that the limits we believe we have are, more often than not, self-imposed. It tells us that the gift of greatness is not reserved for a chosen few, but is available to all of us who are willing to embark on the journey of deliberate practice. It gives us the tools and the confidence to stop accepting our current abilities as our final destination, and to start building the person we want to become. Commentary. As we come to the end of our journey through Peak, I find myself reflecting on one central idea that feels truly revolutionary. It's the idea that potential is not a fixed trait, but an expandable vessel. For so long, we've thought of potential as a cup we are born with. Some people get a large cup, some get a small one. Our job in life, through education and practice, is simply to fill that cup as much as we can. But we can never make the cup bigger. What Anders Ericsson shows us, with a lifetime of scientific evidence, is that this metaphor is completely wrong. Through the right kind of practice, we are not just filling the cup. We are actively building a bigger one. We are creating abilities that didn't exist before. The brain of the London cabbie physically changed to accommodate a mental map of the city. Steve Falloon's brain developed new pathways to handle an impossible amount of information. They didn't just reach their potential, they built it. This is, I believe, one of the most empowering ideas a person can ever encounter. It means that where you are right now is not where you have to be. Your current abilities are not a final verdict on your capacity. They are simply a starting point. The second powerful lesson is the profound difference between being busy and being productive, between simply doing a thing and intentionally practicing it. How many hours do we spend in our lives on autopilot? Driving, working, even in our hobbies, we often go through the motions. We accumulate experience, but we don't accumulate expertise. Peak forces us to ask a hard question: are we practicing, or are we just playing the same song over and over again? The book serves as a powerful call to intentionally. It asks us to take a more active role in our own growth, to stop being passive consumers of our own lives and become deliberate architects of our skills. So, how can you start applying this today? It can feel overwhelming, but the principles are beautifully simple. Here are a few small steps. First, choose one small, specific skill you want to improve. Not get better at guitar, but play the G chord transition smoothly without buzzing. Not be a better writer, but write a clear, one-sentence topic statement for each paragraph. Make it tiny. Second, find a way to get feedback. If you can, find a teacher or coach, even for just one session, to give you a roadmap. If not, become your own coach. Record yourself. Compare your work to that of an expert. Be ruthlessly honest about where the gap is. Third, dedicate just 15 minutes a day to practicing that one tiny skill with intense focus, pushing yourself just a little bit beyond what is comfortable. When your mind starts to wander, stop. Quality over quantity. 15 minutes of deliberate practice is worth more than an hour of mindless repetition. This book is not about becoming a world-class genius in 10,000 hours. It's about embracing the process of improvement. It's about the quiet satisfaction of seeing yourself do something today that you couldn't do yesterday. It's about taking back control over your own story of what you are capable of. That was a summary of Peak: Secrets from the New Science of Expertise by Ericsson and Robert Poole. We've explored the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only show you the map. The real treasure is found when you make the journey yourself. The true power of this book is in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about has sparked a sense of possibility within you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see your own potential. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets us know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.